helicopter?
The sad thing is that we've had less employment for more wood cut. So we've ended up in the last decade and a half about doubling our cut and at the same time halving our workforce. So more people cut down, get less jobs and less value for cutting more trees. And it's been due primarily to mechanization and to using shortcut methods. And one of the big ones in the actual cutting in the woods is the grapple yarding, which basically changed the way of taking the logs out of the woods once they were cut. The old-fashioned way was to have a really long line, a cable, and then the person would be out there scrambling over the cut logs with what's called a choker, and he'd put the chain around there and hook it, and then hook it on to the wire up above, and then there'd be a signal, and then that log would be yarded out one at a time. Well, what they moved to was a system where they got rid of that guy out there in the middle of the clear cut. They shortened the distance of the road from where the cable was, and they kept it in a visual distance. So a guy would sit in the cab of a machine called a grapple yarder, and he would watch a grappler go down on big tongs, and then he'd visually see, and he'd drop that tongs onto a log. And wherever it hit, that would be it. And then they'd drag it out. Damages a lot of wood, causes a lot more erosion because you have to have a back road to move your cable, and you have to produce about twice as much road for the same amount, and all the roads create a lot more erosion. But you save 5 men on each one of the settings.
Sven, what do you think about the statement, Canada is the Brazil of the North, and our logging? Is it as gloomy as is painted?
I think we have a very serious crisis in this province. And I think unless we wake up to that crisis soon, there are not going to be jobs in the forest industry that many years from now. And what we've got to understand is that time is running out, that the kind of destructive forest policies that we have had and we continue to have in this province are a recipe for disaster.
The government, the last government, appointed Sandy Peel as a commissioner without public, not a real commission which had cross-examination. His parting shot was we were 43% overcut. He looked at it and with today's insight, and what you're looking at with today is you've got satellite photographs and you can see, you're so close to the end you can see it's happening.
I think companies have finally sort of taken a step out of denial, this denial they went through in the 70s and 80s, which was saying, gee, we're not causing any harm, or the environment's not that important an issue. And finally, I think companies are seeing the writing on the wall, and they're seeing that the Canadian public wants environmental protection. So companies are finally realizing that they're going to be kicked out of certain areas that are jewels that we must protect for our children. And so they're not going to go out without kicking and screaming. So that what we're seeing more and more of is mining companies, logging companies, when they're losing these battles with the government, are saying, all right, we'll leave, but this lease that we paid nothing for, you have to give us market value as if we'd logged it anyway. So you have to give us, in the case of Domans and South Moresby National Park, Domans asked for $67 million. The government gave them 37.
And what did the lease cost them?
Nothing. My feeling is that companies that are giving the right to look for ore bodies and companies that are giving the right to log, right in these leases are that right is limited by the requirement that they follow all sorts of environmental guidelines and that they log properly. Companies have always signed these agreements assuming those things were mere lip service. Now that the government is actually requiring them to fulfill those promises, we're seeing these claims for compensation. That's something the courts are going to have to deal with, but it's really an issue for the public and for the politicians to just say no.
We need to get the message out about the life support system role of forests, that they're not just there to provide commodities, and that if we treat them as such, that we're shortchanging the future. So my objective is to get that message out to as many people as possible, that it is in their interest to support alternative stewardship methods in forests, particularly in British Columbia, where we have some of these wild ecosystems left. But the whole blueprint is still there, locked up around us. Many parts of the world have destroyed all their wild ecosystems. They have only managed plantations, which are highly degraded, impoverished ecosystems, and they can't figure out how to duplicate what we have right here. So if we can take advantage of what we have, we can be much ahead in the future. But if we don't act fast, the opportunity will slip through our fingers.